In today's podcast, I'm excited to share with you about the 3 rules, ego, and being your true self in sport. Now, in the fall, I was a part of the Trinity Western University Virtual Leadership Superconference. And the theme for the conference this year focused on student-athlete identity and transformational coaching in a world of change. Now, I've had the privilege of speaking at this annual conference at Trinity Western University a few times, and I have to say that I really missed interacting with the other presenters and the participants in person this year. I presented from my home office via Zoom. So I just want to take a few minutes here to thank Carol Hoffer for hosting the presentation, and for 3 Trinity Western University athletes, Andrew Samuel, Megan Neely, and Dora Kumladi. They've all trained with the Winner Will and will share a little bit of their story in the context of this presentation. So let's get into it now. Here's Carol with a bit of an introduction to start us off. Enjoy.
Introduce Giselle Kruger to you. She's the creator and founder of The Winner Will, with over 35 years experience in competitive sport as an elite athlete and a coach. She spent most of her career, or the beginning part of her career, as a teacher in Calgary, as well as coaching in physical education and elementary, junior, and senior high schools. After completing her master's degree, she was also involved as a guidance counselor and served on a critical incident response team for 8 years in the Calgary Board of Education. Giselle's now retired from teaching, but teaching and coaching go hand in hand, and she spends her time now working as a performance coach. She provides the Winner Will training for student athletes to help them overcome physical, mental, and emotional obstacles so that they can radically transform their athletic performance and excel in all areas of their lives. Giselle's personal life has displayed remarkable resilience. As a breast cancer overcomer, she's an individual who embraces life's challenges as an opportunity to grow. So please welcome Giselle.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here with you. Thanks for that introduction, Carol. It's always great to see you, Carol. We go way back to the Scarlet days. So yeah, I'm in Calgary. Like Carol said, I'm a performance coach, and we are going to have some fun today. We have a whole hour together, and I hope that what I give to you will be useful for you, because as a performance coach, it's all about our performance, and that's what we do in the Winner Will. We train the whole person, body, soul, and spirit. And so when you think about that, the body, physical part of you, that's pretty obvious. And then the soul is comprised of the mind, the will, and the emotions. Psychologists often use the word soul synonymous with personality. It's kind of the essence of who you are as an individual. So it's where we interact with ourselves, others, and the world around us. And that spirit, the spirit, is that deeper part of you where the bigger questions in life surface, like the meaning of life sort of questions. But today we're going to focus on the soul, which is where you do the training of the mental and emotional part of your performance. So we're going to do a little soul work today. We're going to talk about the 3 rules. We're going to talk about what's going on with your ego and how to manage it, and then why it's so important to be your true self in sport, well, in life. So, and all that is going to help you to be free to compete, be free to perform well when you have to, and most significantly, it's going to help you to just be yourself. And so that's my hope today, is that that is what you get out of today. So, as mentioned in the introduction, I was an elite athlete, and then I became a coach and coached for many years. And I was really fortunate to coach my teams and athletes in many championship finals. We always kind of found our way to the playoffs, if you know what I mean. Bit of a grind, but we'd make it there. But there's this one championship match that stuck with me over all these years, and I just want to share that story with you now. So it was the day of a city volleyball championship final, and one of my players, Talon, comes to see me in my guidance office. And she says, "Coach, I'm freaking out. I said, well, what's going on? She said, I don't know. I've just been thinking about it and I'm really nervous about tonight's match. Everyone's going to be there. My friends, my parents, even my grandparents are coming. She said, I didn't sleep much last night. I'm just sick to my stomach. So I said, well, I could see she was upset. There was a lot at stake. It was a big match that night. And, we've likely all been there. You guys are high school athletes, some of you, right? And competing in that big match where everything is on the line. So I said to her, what's the worst thing that could happen tonight? And she said that I'm going to be the one who makes the mistake to cause the team to lose the match. Well, there was an obstacle for her. There was a problem, and she was right. If she didn't deal with it before that night, she could be the one to lose the match. So I knew the problem wasn't physical. She had done all the physical training, all the skill work. She had everything she needed to play the game that night. The obstacle wasn't physical for her. So if it wasn't physical and it wasn't technical, what is it? What's keeping her from being free to play and just enjoy it? What's the obstacle? It was a mental obstacle. So I said to her, Talon, you're not that important. She kind of looks at me, leans back in her chair, and she says, oh, right, the 3 rules. I said, that's right, the 3 rules. Nobody cares, you're not that important, and it's not all about you. And I said to her, you're an important part of this team, Talon, but you're not that important. Everyone has their role. I know who you are. You know who you are. Just go out there tonight and be yourself. So I said to her, you are enough. And off she goes back to class. I think she was feeling a little better. So that night, I'm on the sideline coaching the girls and the fans are going crazy. The gym is packed, cheering, heckling. We've battled it out with this team all year. And it all comes down to game point in the 5th set. And guess whose turn it is to serve? It's Talon's. So she looks at me on her way back to the service line as if to say, I knew it would be me. So over the noisy crowd, I mouth the words to her, you are enough, like that. She cracks a little smile, grabs the ball, goes through her service routine, and bam, she just nails her serve. We win the point, we win the match, we win the championship. And it was a great win for our team. There is no question. But the real win that night was Talon's personal victory. She had overcome that mental obstacle. So how did Talon go from freaking out in my office to being able to perform in that critical moment of competition? How did she do that? I mean, no one wants to be the one who makes the mistake to lose the match. Everybody wants to be the one who can make the play in those high pressure situations. So what happened for her that day? Talon was able to identify and remove her mental obstacle and perform out of her true self, her true identity, who she was, where she was on that given day. And here's how she did it. The 3 rules. Nobody cares. You're not that important. And it's not all about you. Now, at first, the 3 rules may sound a little harsh. You might even say they're cruel or unkind. But they're actually, when you really hear, you'll hear about them shortly here, they're actually a form of tough love. And I didn't sit down one day and say, okay, I'm going to write 3 rules that people need to know to be a better athlete. No, these things kind of came to me through life, sort of truisms like that I've learned the hard way, mostly as an athlete and a coach, a teacher, a guidance counselor, parent. So let's get into the 3 rules in a little more detail. Rule number 1, nobody cares. Now, nobody cares isn't saying that you're not a valuable person. Of course you are. And by nobody, I don't mean that your loved ones, your close friends, people in your life don't care about you. Of course they do. What I mean by nobody is all those other people, teammates, classmates, your opponents, people watching, social media, the media. It's that imaginary audience where a person is convinced that every move is being watched with interest by the rest of the world. Our tendency as humans is to convince ourselves that these other people really care about what we're doing and how we're doing it. But believe it or not, nobody cares. Nobody really cares that you made a mistake in competition, how fast or how strong you are, how much you've practiced, that you're having an off day or a good day, or whether you won or lost. And this isn't personal. Nobody's out to get you. It's just that you're not on other people's radar. That may be hard to believe in this social media saturated world we're living in, but it's true. So if nobody cares about you, what do they care about? They care about themselves. They have their own long list of things going on in their lives and that they're thinking about, and that you're likely not one of them. So why is it so important to know the first rule, that nobody cares? Because it sets you free. It sets you free from worrying about what other people think of you. It lets you make mistakes and learn from them because it frees you from that negative self-talk. It lets you focus your energy where it matters most, to be who you are, your true self, and then really go for it in your sport and in life. So if you're fretting over, what everybody around you thinks about you, don't bother. You can just let go of that self-consciousness and start focusing on doing what you do best. Be yourself and do the work of training, training your body, your skills, your mind, and you will be the one to perform under pressure when it matters most. Nobody cares. Then rule number 2, you're not that important. Now, as an athlete, it's important to clearly understand your role. Like, think about Talon. She was an important member of our team, but she wasn't more important than the team. Everyone on the team had a role, and no team functions without each member playing a part. And I don't know if any of you are from an individual sport, but when you compete in an individual sport, there's always a number of people surrounding you who play a role in your success. So, you're an important part, but you're not that important. So how can this rule help you? Well, like Talon, you can be honest about where you're at, talk about it, and then get your mind right. You can overcome the obstacle of self-importance and be yourself and do your part. It takes a lot of courage to do that. I say that, but I know how much courage it takes to do that. But it's worth it. And when you do, you're going to be the one. You're going to be the one who can get the job done. And then rule number 3, it's not all about you. Now, this rule is similar to rule number 2, but it has more to do with a certain attitude. It's the prima donna syndrome. Have you ever had someone like that on your team? That temperamental person who has this inflated view of her own talent, the one who has to be the star. This type of self-absorption creates so much pressure to perform and a heavy sense of it's all about me. So the joy of competition is replaced by it's all about me, I better perform or we won't be successful. Wow, like talk about stressful, right? I mean, confidence is good, but when it becomes arrogance or self-absorption, it's not good. You're not the center of the universe. The sun doesn't revolve around you. Rule number 3 is about keeping things in perspective and having a modest opinion of your own talent, acknowledging that everything doesn't come down to you. And when you follow this rule, when you embrace that it's not all about you, it frees you from the obstacle of self-absorption. It's such a great way to take some of the pressure off, to perform as your true self and be kind to yourself when things on the field or the court or the ice or whatever your sport is are less than perfect. So that's the 3 rules. Pretty simple. Nobody cares. You're not that important. And it's not all about you. So you're here today for a reason. I'm so glad you're here. And I honestly wish we were in person so I could see you and see your eyes and, just connect with you. Hopefully we'll do that during Q&A. But perhaps you want to be the one who can get the point when it matters. You want to be the one who can perform under pressure. Well, the 3 rules are life-changing, as simple as they are. In fact, student athletes who I've worked with in the winter will, they've gone on to next phases of their life, and they apply what they're learning in elite sport, and they come back and they share their, successes and experiences and all the things that are going on in their life. And inevitably, they mention how the 3 rules have had a significant positive impact on their life. It's one of their favorite things. And, that's kind of stuck with them. And we often joke, we say there's two kinds of people in this world, those who know the three rules and those who don't. They're a powerful tool to use when you need to be reminded to be your true self. But here is the thing. The three rules are only as effective as your understanding of what's really going on inside yourself. So that's what we're going to do right now, is really like, what do I mean when I say be your true self? Yes, we want you to learn how to be mentally tough, and we want you to learn how to win and be successful and overcome mental obstacles. But we want all of that to come from your true self. Why? Why is that so important? Because anything that's going to mean anything to you in your life flows out of your true self. You are unique. You are an individual. This is where all the authentic growth and learning happens. It's where your confidence is built. It's where true connections in your life happen. Your true identity, being your true self, is so important because you can't build anything meaningful on something that isn't real. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You can't build anything meaningful, and meaningful is the key word there, on something that isn't real. But the reality is there are so many messages coming at you, coming at me, from so many sources that maybe you're just not quite enough. You're not smart enough. You're not tall enough. You're not fit enough. You're not good looking enough. You're not nice enough. You're not thin enough. You're not whatever enough. And all of those messages pull us away from our true self into our false self. Simply put, the false self is ego. And the problem with ego, the problem with being in your false self, okay, listen to this, because this is kind of where it's at. It creates obstacles that keep you from performing under pressure. But when you know yourself and you want to be your true self, it's a lot easier to be unaffected by those outside messages that literally take us away from our true self and pull us into our false self. So when Talon came to talk to me that day in my office, she just needed a simple reminder to be herself. She knew who she was. She knew she did all the physical and skill work all season. She was just afraid that she wasn't enough in that moment for that competition. She was in ego. She was in her false self. And ego is constantly obsessed with what other people think, being noticed, being the one. And if she hadn't have dealt with what was going on inside of her that day, when it came to the match that night, ego would have served the ball into the net. And what most people think of when they hear the word ego is this unhealthy belief in our own importance, right? I mean, something like ego is the need to be better than, more than, recognized far more than is reasonable. People often think of it as like self-centered ambition or arrogance or big-headedness, like someone is an egomaniac. And that's how most people think about ego. And that's definitely part of it. But when we really look at how it shows up in each of us, it may surprise you how often ego comes into play. I know, for myself, as I work hard to pursue getting better at something, shifting from one career to another, understanding ego and how it takes me away from my true self into my false self has really helped me to see how often ego comes into play, and more importantly, how I can manage it. So whether we are aspiring to something, whether we're succeeding at something, or whether we're failing at something, ego is the enemy every step of the way. Ryan Holiday, in his book, Ego is the Enemy, says that. And I think it's so true. Ego is the enemy every step of the way. But of course, most of us don't see it this way. I know I didn't see myself that way. After all, I wrote the 3 rules. I thought I had ego all tied up. We just don't see ourselves as the one with the ego. Many of us are, what they say, the proverbial sick person ignorant of the cause of her disease. We need to see ego for what it is. Ego is the enemy, and it's at the root of almost every conceivable problem and obstacle. So it's so important that we become aware of it and then find out what we can do to manage it so it doesn't take us out. So the simple concept today is that your ego is the false self over here, okay? Who we think we should be instead of who we really are. The word picture here I want you to get is, here I am, here you are. This is who I am, who you are, where we are in our life, okay? And then over here is the false self, who we think we should be, all those outside messages which come into play, and this is what I really want you to hear, which come into play when we feel who we are. Actually, our true identity isn't enough. There's something off. Ego, the false self, is activated when we feel things like insecurity, lack of confidence. Like I said, that we're not enough or less than in some way. We're threatened. Maybe we're too much. Maybe we're overlooked, rejected. Everything, so much is exposed in sport. When you sign up to be an elite athlete, you are exposing yourself, really. And the ego's job is to protect us, to hide, or to take away all those painful feelings that we have. And this is what we've kind of boiled it down to. There are typically 4 ways that ego does this. I call them red flags, things that serve as a warning for us, things that will alert you to the fact that you may be an ego, moving away from your true self into that false self. So as we go through these red flags, I'm really excited about this actually, because I invited a few Spartan athletes who have done this Winter World training to share a bit about their story and how they can identify with a particular red flag. So the first red flag is being critical. Okay, being critical, being hard on yourself or on others. Have you ever heard anyone say this about someone before? Oh man, she's her own worst enemy. Holiday says that ego is your worst enemy that lives inside of you. Ego shows up when you're picking yourself or you're picking someone else apart. Simply put, when we are critical, it's like our ego coming into play because of some negative feeling we're having in a certain situation. So being critical is the first kind of red flag that says, maybe you might be an ego. Number 2, being judgmental, judging yourself or others. Judgment is when we think we know the way things should be, and we get upset and we do things like gossip, blame, pout, get angry because things are not as we see them or the way we think they should be. And the key word here is should. I should be better. I should know that by now. I shouldn't make that mistake. The coach should play me more. That person shouldn't be on the court before me. That's ego. When we think we know and we place judgment on ourselves or others instead of accepting life on life's terms. For example, this is where perfectionism shows up. The judge in me says, oh man, you suck unless you're perfect. And the reality is none of us are perfect. We're always a work in progress. So now I would like to introduce Andrew Samuel. He is a 3rd-year Spartan soccer athlete, and he's going to share a bit of his story that will illustrate these first 2 red flags. So here's Andrew. He's going to unmute himself and take over here.
Hey, Giselle. Hey, everyone. I'll just hop right into it. So
thank you.
Yeah. So my name's Andrew, like Giselle said, and ever since I can remember, I've been in love with soccer. I love playing soccer. I love watching soccer, and soccer just mesmerized me. Like most kids, I started playing community soccer at a very young age and quickly got identified as an elite athlete. When I was 12 years old, I was playing for a club and was working very hard to improve and just be the best player I could be. But one day after practice, I was walking over to meet my dad, and he was there to pick me up. And my coach walked alongside me and said these 10 words to me. You used to have so much potential, Andrew. What happened? His words shattered me in that moment and have stuck with me for years. I don't know if anything like that has ever happened to you, but those 10 words made me doubt myself, be critical of myself, and question everything. Should I quit the sport I love? Who else have I disappointed? Do I even like soccer anymore? What was I doing wrong? All questions that a passionate 12-year-old boy really should never have to ask himself. For a long time after that day, I contemplated quitting. I became overly critical of myself and my own abilities. I no longer found joy in the game I once used to pour my heart and soul into. It became a chore to go to practice and games, and I wanted to quit, or I thought I wanted to quit. You see, the sport of soccer has always been there for me through good times and bad. The game has never changed. It's the opinions of others, the judgment of others that can be critical and harsh, especially on young athletes. And what I didn't know that day when my coach said these words to me is that the opinions of others will change from week to week. You'll score a goal one week and be a prodigy. You'll hit the post the next, and some may say, like my coach did to me, that you've got no future. Understanding that people's opinions are fleeting, it gave me freedom. Freedom to use my strengths, freedom to develop, and freedom to love the game like I did when I was a kid. And now, although I remember those words that were spoken to me, I don't allow my mind to linger there anymore. Instead, I can acknowledge those words and the opinions of others and still choose to be myself. I no longer allow the weight of thinking that I have to live up to a coach's opinion of me, or anyone else's for that matter. Now, I play with the intention of improving, progressing, and moving forward every day, and I'm so glad I didn't quit the sport I love. I'm so happy I was able to stick with it and ultimately earn a spot on the Spartan University team. I know today that being critical of myself or listening to the judgment of others only takes me away from who I really am, and that's who I really want to be. Today, I'm surrounded by amazing players and friends who helped me grow as a player tremendously, and at the moment, I'm loving soccer more than I have in my entire life. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. That is an amazing story. And you can really hear, what we're talking about, those two first red flags. And it's pretty simple: being critical and being judgmental, the judgment of others, the judgment on ourselves. So thank you so much. And if you have questions specifically from Andrew, of Andrew in the Q&A, make sure, you just put that into the chat. So you're welcome to address him or the other two athletes that are going to come on here shortly. So yeah, really excited for the Q&A where we can have a little bit more interaction. So moving on to the third red flag. The third red flag is comparison, comparing yourself to others. Many athletes look to someone on their team, an opponent, or even someone they don't even know on social media and compare themselves. When we compare ourselves to others, it's just not a fair comparison because, like I said earlier, each of us is unique, an individual with a different story, a different background, different gifts, talents, different struggles. Yet we do it all the time. And the only comparison you're allowed to make is with yourself the day before, and focus on improving yourself each day. So I'd like to welcome now Megan Mealy. And Megan is a third-year Spartan volleyball athlete who will share a bit of her story about comparison. So go ahead, Meg.
So I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and for as young as I can remember, I've loved sports and always played out my competitive spirit. I think it's natural and almost unavoidable to bring comparison into sport. As athletes, we're always trying to better ourselves, right? And we use others as a benchmark to judge our progress and ability. I think that's pretty normal. But for me, it became something I did way too much. In high school, I didn't realize how much comparison ruled my life. I compared myself to everyone and everything. I didn't realize how this part of my ego was negatively shaping my mental state. It was like, as Giselle mentioned, pulling me away from who I really was. Since I was generally one of the better players in my age group growing up, I compared myself to people who weren't as good as me, which actually inflated my ego. And I know this sounds bad, but comparing myself to others made me feel better about myself. But then when I came to university here at Trinity, things went from bad to worse. Comparison absolutely ruled my life. But this time I was on the negative end of it. And what I mean by that is I wasn't the best anymore. I was playing with girls who were older, bigger, and more skilled than me. And then I was comparing myself to them, which absolutely killed my self-confidence and my ability to play free. I compared myself to my teammates in every area of my life. And when I didn't measure up, I felt worthless and like my role on the team wasn't meaningful. After all, I wasn't a starter and I wasn't the best on the team at anything, let alone volleyball. Comparing myself to others and being an ego in this way, I believe has kept me from enjoying university as much as I could. And essentially, it's kept me from being my true self. The number one thing I'm working on right now is focusing on what's in my control. And when I catch myself starting to compare myself to others, I remember that the only thing I can compare myself to is me the day before. Changing this lifelong habit of comparison is really hard, but I'm doing it one day at a time, and I think it's really paying off for me. I remind myself just to be me and work hard every day to train my body, my skills, and my mind. And it's amazing how so far this year, I can already see how I'm so much more free to play. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Oh man. You can just hear that. Takes so much courage to focus on what you can focus on. And that is, like Megan said, setting up your life in such a way that you're training your body, your skills, and your mind every day. You're pushing the limits of your body, your skills, and your mind. That's what sports psychologists say, actually, is the only thing you can really train to be great. So that's what we focus on, is just saying, okay, what are you doing in your life to train those three things and push the limits every day? Because when you do that, you are going to get better. And that takes the focus off everything else and just puts it on where it should be, which is training yourself, your whole self. So now the fourth red flag is identity enhancers. And by the way, did I say thank you, Megan? Thank you so much for that. So the fourth red flag is identity enhancers. So we develop identity enhancers or attach ourselves to something because we don't feel that our true self is enough. Or when we feel any of those negative feelings or emotions that I mentioned before, less than, lack of confidence, insecure, being overlooked, threatened, we attach ourselves to those things to make us feel better. Basically, when we use an identity enhancer, we buy into three lies. These are the three lies. I am what I have, I am what I do, and I am what other people think and say I am. Identity enhancers can be things like the clothes you wear. I am what I wear, your performance, who your friends are, maybe where you vacation, how you look, what you drive, where you live, like all those sorts of things, who you date. So instead of being who you really are and deal with the fact that maybe we aren't as good at something yet, or maybe we feel threatened, or whatever that negative feeling is, we think that the identity enhancer will make us feel better about ourselves, or at the very least, help us look better to those around us. But the truth is, they really don't, do they? Because they're fake. I mean, maybe they help us feel better for a moment or two, I mean, the billion-dollar clothing and makeup industry, not to mention cars and homes and those sorts of things, alone can attest to that. Just to name a few of the more common identity enhancers. But in the long term, those identity enhancers really don't make us feel any better. Why? Because they take us away from our true self, and they actually create and reinforce the false self. So now I'd like to welcome athlete Dora Kumladi to speak. She is a fourth-year Spartan volleyball player who will share about identity enhancers. So thank you, Dora, for coming on the call today.
Hello, everyone. So when I was 17 years old in grade 12, I had a full-blown meltdown in volleyball. Pretty much out of the blue, I just couldn't set the ball anymore. And you're probably thinking, what do you mean you couldn't set the ball? Trust me, I was very confused myself. I'm not exaggerating when I say that every ball I touched was a double. And every time the ball crossed the side to our net, I hoped for the opportunity to bump set so I wouldn't risk embarrassing myself and letting my teammates down. I didn't realize it at the time, but my whole life revolved around volleyball. It's how I made all of my friends, where I spent all of my free time, and where I placed all of my identity. Identity enhancers that Giselle's talking about played a very big role in my life, especially in sport. Essentially, I was an ego with the I am what I do mentality. With every mistake I made, I felt my sense of worth and my confidence absolutely plummet. What's worse was that I thought my teammates didn't even want to be my friends anymore either because I couldn't set them the ball, making the pit I was digging myself into even deeper. This all sounds very bleak, I know, and you can bet that I really wanted to quit the sport that I had loved and played for over 6 years. I thought I was done. My performance in volleyball was my identity, and even though it sounds really dramatic, it honestly felt like life was over for me. After suffering this way for close to 2 months, I was finally able to remove my identity from the game itself. I took a breath, I took a step back, and was able to see how I created this false self of I am my performance. And I realized how much pressure that had put on me. With help from Giselle and another mentor, I let go of all of that pressure. And I know it sounds bad, but I literally stopped caring about volleyball. I went on a very timely vacation, which allowed me to detach from the identity enhancer that I am what I do. And I came back with a new attitude and a new perspective. I was free to be myself, and I was free to just play the sport that I love. Obviously, my confidence still wavered at times, and I find it still does to this day. But by fighting the lie that I am what I do and believing that I'm enough, I've been able to play with so much more freedom, and I have way more fun too. And to tie it all together, when I got to Trinity in my first year, the theme of our team was who you are is greater than what you do. I mean, could it have been any more perfect?
Oh, wow. That's so perfect. Thank you, Dora. Thanks for sharing. I mean, I could really hear that when a person is unaware and we're allowing those identity enhancers to take us away from our true self, it affects our connections with ourselves, with others. And I think the reason for that is because it's really hard to truly connect to something that isn't real. Like it's incredible actually when you start to get that freedom. So think about the true connections you have with your friends and family, the people in your life. Do you care what they wear or how much money they have or if they're the best player on the team? No, you care about them and like them for who they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't we all appreciate when we are known and liked for who we are? Author Tim Keller tells us the deepest longing within each person is to be truly known and deeply loved for who we are. That's our hope, isn't it? When, we see how our ego operates, when we are aware of our ego, it allows us to manage it and choose on a daily basis to be your true self, to be who you really are. Sometimes on a moment by moment basis for me, but that's what we want for you. So those are the 4 red flags. Thank you again to the athletes, and make sure if you have any questions of those 3 athletes, please ask in the chat, and then Carol and I think Carol and Bailey will moderate that. So the four red flags alert us to the fact that ego could be into play. Okay. Being critical, being judgmental, comparing yourself to others, and identity enhancers. So the next question is, what do we do to manage our ego when these red flags alert us? What do we do with that when we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not enough, or, our true self is, we're not feeling that we're okay there, and we're getting pulled off into that false self, into ego. I had a client who learned about this recently, and the first thing he said to me is, well, how do I get rid of my ego? Like, I just want to get rid of it once and for all. And I told him it's impossible to get rid of ego completely. We all have ego, and you can never get rid of it altogether. It's a mind structure, okay, that it's there to protect us, and it has its job, But the beauty is we can manage it now that you're aware of it and what it really is, and it doesn't take much. I want to give you 3 things that you can do in the moment you recognize one or more of these red flags. Oh, I'm being critical or judgmental or comparing, or I'm attaching myself to something, to let you know that your ego may be in play. And literally it takes less than a minute. Okay, so here they are. Number 1, I want you to be aware. Awareness is the beginning. As soon as you become aware that you're an ego, your ego begins to dissolve. When you recognize the lie or the illusion, all of a sudden it just loses its power to take you away from your true self. So start with awareness. That's pretty simple. Then number 2 is be curious. Take a little mental step back and just look at what may be drawing you away from your true self. Check in and see what's going on inside of you. You know, like, that's the 3rd time I was critical of myself today. What's going on for me? Like, am I feeling rejected? Am I feeling insecure? Or am I comparing myself to that person again? How come? What am I really thinking? What am I really feeling? Or this is a classic one for me anyway. I need to go buy a new outfit for that big event coming up to make myself feel better. Well, ask the question, like, what's going on inside? You've got a whole closet full of clothes. So be curious, reflect a bit, and really look at what is going on inside. And 3rd, be gentle. Yes, be gentle with yourself. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, where something keeps popping up no matter how many times you try to get rid of it. And it gets a little bit harsh, right? Oh, I'm being critical on myself again. Oh, I thought I dealt with that already. I'm comparing myself to others. So perhaps in the past you were hard on yourself, but now you're going to be gentle on yourself. Less like whack-a-mole and more like, here's a word picture for you, like taking a feather out of your pocket and touching a fine crystal glass while you're having this little conversation with yourself. Oh, ego, there you are again. Gently acknowledge it and let it dissolve away. Try not to take yourself so seriously, maybe even laugh at the reality of how often ego tries to take you away from who you really are. When you practice these 3 simple things, when you recognize your ego, so just take a minute and be aware, be curious, and be gentle on yourself. That allows you to interrupt that enemy of ego and choose to be your true self. Stay in that. Because this is why it's so important, because I watch it. I watch the transformation happen. We know that when student athletes know themselves and then they want to be their true self and they give themselves generously to whatever they do, they will perform well when they have to. Performance comes from a person who says, you know what? I'm just going to be me. This is who I am. And I'm going to do the hard work and stay in the struggle it takes to be an elite athlete. And you just try and compete against an athlete like that. I watch athletes who have done this work, and honestly, it's impossible to compete against someone like that. It's beautiful. So now I encourage you to apply these 3 rules to your life. Nobody cares. You're not that important. It's not all about you. And work towards being your true self. Now that you're aware of ego and what it is, it doesn't take much. And I guarantee you will see the benefits in your sport, school, and life. And I am so excited now just to open it up to some Q&A, and just really, really excited to kind of hear from some of you. And also, if you have questions of the athletes, please feel free to ask them questions as well. Okay,
Thanks,
so I'm going to turn it over to Carol.
Thanks, Giselle. And thank you, Dora, Megan, and Andrew, for sharing your stories and being vulnerable with us. What an incredible opportunity to get to hear those stories and see what the application of what you've learned through the Winner Will. There are a couple questions here. So I'm going to start with one for you, Giselle. Let me just get back up here. Do you have any tips on getting out of a mental slump during volleyball?
Yeah, I mean, in those slumps, like, I don't know if it's like a month-long slump or a slump you're talking about on the court, but in those slumps, like, I would say slump is such a good word, you know, it is, when you do the training and you're equipped to deal with reality, which are slumps. I mean, I don't know anyone who's an athlete who's exposing themselves and putting themselves in the arena, so to speak, who doesn't go through that, who doesn't have kind of like blips where their performance is less than what they want, So it's so important to do the training ahead of time. And the training kind of happens on Zoom, one-on-one, with a coffee or a water in your hand. It's not like, there's some magic bullet or secret or something that's going to happen. No, like, you need the tools, first of all, and then you need to practice them just like you do going into the weight room. Can you imagine going into the weight room and having, a personal trainer say, okay, this is how you do a squat, this is how you do a squat, and you're going to get way stronger when you do this squat, and make sure your knees don't go over your toes and all that kind of stuff. And then you leave and you never go back into the weight room again. Can you imagine getting stronger? It's never going to happen. But the mental training is the same. It's like there's no secret. It's just work. It's like you got to dig in and really look at what is going on inside of you. And so what we do at the Winner Will is we just give you the language and the space to come. So when I work with Andrew or Megan or Dora or all the athletes that I work with, it's and you can ask them this, like, there's no secret. There's no like big thing. It's just, let's get to work. What's going on for you? Here are some tools. Here's some language for you to deal with it so that you're equipped in those moments when you have a slump where you're like, no, I know what to do here. I have, enough, in my kind of toolkit that I'm going to be able to pull that out in that moment or in that month or whatever, to come out of it. And I would say there's just no shortcut. It just takes a lot of work, a lot of intentionality, and you can do it. It's like, it's everyone can learn how to perform under pressure. I really believe that in the Winner Will. We believe that, like, anyone can learn this. It's not, for a selected few. So I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Giselle. Dora, I have a two-part question for you. What other things did you start to place your identity in, either things about you or other things that you enjoy? And how did you let go of your identity being in volleyball?
Those are some awesome questions. Some other places that I found that I placed my identity was, well, first of all, as a volleyball player, I loved, and it sounds bad, but I loved being known as like this elite athlete who's like the best in the city or the province and stuff. And I really held on to that. And that's why I think it was so hard when I started to see my performance fall. I realized that I was like, wait, who am I if not all these things that I think I am, and that all these like titles that I have and like awards that I receive. And then another place that I touched on was my relationships. So I've always been like someone who loves like being friends with a lot of people and is like very extroverted. And I started being very like aware of how people talked to me and interacted with me, and like how many people would laugh at my jokes and such. And if I felt like any sort of tension or like hesitance from another person, I was like, oh my gosh, they don't like me anymore. What am I doing wrong? Like nothing that I have to say is like worth it for them, kind of thing. So those are like the places that I kind of would place my identity mostly. Like obviously there are other ones like normal, like high school girls. Like I loved like picking out awesome things to wear to school and all that kind of stuff too. But those were kind of the big ones volleyball wise. And then how did I let go of my identity in volleyball? It's still a process for me. When the whole thing happened in grade 12, I I realized, well, Giselle really helped me. Like, I really loved the three rules. I thought they were so like grounding for me in that time, just like kind of got me out of my own head. And like, I've said this before, but like, I was able to kind of let go of like myself and like the pressure I was putting on myself by thinking like, no, nobody cares what you're doing. I'm not that important and it's not all about me. And that was really helpful. And then also just being able to play free, that really tied into that. And then before coming to Trinity, I don't know where you guys are at with like your faith and everything, but coming here, I also just started placing my identity in Jesus and who I am as a child of God. And that is also like really freeing as an athlete, because all of a sudden it's not about your performance anymore and about what other people think of you. It's about how you play and how you can honor the Father, kind of thing. So that's what has really been really helpful for me. And then also just like to let go of your identity, just think like your friends and your family love you regardless of how you play your sport. They don't place your identity in how you play. So why should you? That's kind of all I had there.
Great. Thanks, Dora. That's a great response.
Thank you.
Megan, here's a question for you. How did you get better, or how do you get better at your sport without comparing yourself to players that are better than you? And how do you compare yourself in a positive way to learn and grow?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say how I've shifted my mind is more like, I still see girls on my team or girls I play against, and I'm like, wow, like they are better than me at a certain skill. And before it would just be kind of like a lazy, like they're better than me, I'll never be that good, and then feeling bad about myself. But now I'm kind of trying to shift it to more like, okay, she has a really good sharp cross shot. How does she do that? And then I'm like breaking down the skills that I used to just compare myself to and breaking it down to like, okay, she has a good sharp cross shot. How can I do that? What's the footwork? What's like the positioning? What's my timing? Whatever. And so it's more like learning from like comparing myself. I still like sort of compare myself, but it's more like, how can I be like that? Not like, oh, I will never be like that, and then feeling bad about myself. So I kind of just use that in practice more now, instead of like kicking myself when I mess up. It's like, okay, what can I get better at? Yeah, that's just my focus, which I think has helped a lot. And I think it's helped me get a lot better at my sport, because then I'm only focusing on the process and what I can control and not how other people are performing. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Megan.
Awesome. Andrew, looking back, are you grateful in some ways for what your coach said to you because you were able to move past it? And are you enjoying soccer and are more confident now than before? How were you able to move past what your coach said?
Yeah, that's a good question there, Jethro. Yeah, to be honest, this is one of the instances in which a coach has, verbalized that they don't believe in me. And how I managed to move past that is just over time, I realized that, man, when was the last time I've seen this guy? When was the last time this guy has checked in on me? Uh, it's been years since I've seen him. I probably haven't seen this coach in 7, 8 years. So just allowing time to change my mindset and see like, who am I actually surrounding myself with? I'm surrounded by my family, my best friends who all uplift me and support me. So a big way that I move past this is, like I said, surrounding myself with like-minded individuals who all want me to be the best version of myself and encourage me rather than bring me down. And when they do judge me, it's in a way that, like, I'm sure you've heard the term constructive criticism. I always appreciate constructive criticism from my friends, whether they point out things that I'm doing wrong on the pitch or just in my everyday life, things that I could change to become a better Christian. Every aspect of life can be changed by the people you surround yourself with. So while that thought kind of still lingers in my mind, Jethro, I think that it's almost like a driving force that's in the back of my mind It's not the primary force that kind of drives me to be who I want to be. But, if I ever do come up against the guy again in the future, uh, I won't be, I won't be resenting him or anything like that. It's just going to be a matter of knowing who I am, what I've done over the past couple of years to get me to where I am today, and uh, understanding that I don't have to live up to his opinion of me or his standards of what he think I should do, because everybody's threshold is different. You can't expect everyone to perform at the peak of their game for years upon years upon years. Uh, so just understanding that it's up to you to make that decision in your head and understand that you're the only one that's with you for your whole life. So it's up to you to make yourself happy and leave the opinions of others behind. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Amazing.
Great response. Thanks, Andrew. We got time for one more question. So Giselle, I'm going to give this one to you from Jenna. Do you have any tips for dealing with ego through comparison in a game situation?
Well, like I said, it doesn't take much for the ego to dissolve. So to me, as soon as I feel I'm in ego, like I'm in a game and I'm comparing myself to someone else, or, as coaches, we do that too. We I don't know, am I as technical? Am I, whatever. And it's usually coming from something inside of me that says, I don't think I'm enough, or I don't think, whatever. And so really it is about kind of using that little tool that I gave you, like, awareness, like right away now, when you're going to compare yourself to someone, you're going to go, oh my gosh, that's my ego. Have a little chuckle, have a laugh, and go, oh, there you are again. I don't need you right now. I'm choosing to be myself and to give everything I have on the court right now. And that's going to be my best. And so I know it sounds really simple, but it is. And that's the beauty of it. Once you start to realize how much power you have to, because of awareness, like, yes, I'm in ego, comparison is ego. I mean, it's just that simple. So what do? Well, I come back to myself and go do a quick check. Curious, maybe, what's going on? Oh yeah. Oh, right. I'm really concerned about the scouts in the, and I'm wondering what he thinks about her versus me, like whatever it is going on. And then just go, that's okay. Be gentle, laugh a little bit. And that ego just literally goes away. And so it's something you have to practice. You can't just kind of know about it and then think, oh, well, because I know about it, kind of like what I was saying earlier about the squat in the gym, you have to practice it. And so I'm excited for you that you asked that question, because that means that you really got it. Like in that moment, when I'm comparing myself to others in competition, it's going to take away from my performance. I don't want that. I want to be free to play. I want to be myself. And so who am I? And then one of the things I want you to really hear here, just kind of a little caveat, is sports psychologists say that really there's only 3 things you can train: your body, your skills, and your mind. And so every day I want you to be thinking about, how are you pushing the limits of your body, skills, and mind every day? And so you might do a little thing and check in and say, what am I doing today for my mind? I'm going to really be aware of any of those 4 red flags. And I'm going to make a little journal and just say, oh, wow. And then you'll start to see some patterns. Okay. The other thing I want to say is, if you want to dig into this work a little bit more, check out our website at thewinnerwill.com, and you're welcome to send me an email or touch base in some way, to start to do some of this work. The Winner Will is one way. I mean, it's not the only way to do this training, but we've just put pen to paper and got some tools for you so that you can be equipped to do what you sign up to do, which is to be an elite athlete and to expose yourself and put yourself out there. And it takes so much courage, and it is not for the faint of heart. So I would say, just like you get into the gym get into the mind, get into the soul, get into this training where you have to really look at your mind, your will, and your emotions and what is going on there. And is it helping you, or is it, is it hurting you? So I'll stop there. I think we're almost done.
We are right at the end. Giselle, thank you so much. I want to echo Anna's comments in the chat. I learn something new every time I hear you speak. I just enjoy your presentation so much. It is so valuable, and I'd encourage people to check out your website. We've put the link in the chat, so if you want to check that out, copy it. If you want to review.
Thank you for listening today, and feel free to email me at giselle@thewinnerworld.com if you'd like to learn more about how you can get started in this training.